Welcome to OT News.
Murder hornets are spreading across the country. Stay home, stay safe, folks. Now to Wolf Blitzer, who will give you the latest updates on Chris Van Hollen's campaign for Senate. Thanks, Diane. I'm here with Chris Van Hollen, current Senator of Maryland, who is campaigning for the full funding of the IDEA full funding bill. Chris, tell me a little bit about this bill.
Thanks, Wolf. It's great to be here. The IDEA full funding bill is a bipartisan legislation proposed by myself, Senator Pat Roberts, and Representative Jared Huffman, and it is looking to cover the entire cost of educational opportunities for children with disabilities. Unfortunately, currently, the funding of IDEA is at an all-time low. Over the next several years, with the help of this bill, this funding would increase steadily and eventually reach the 40% originally allocated by the federal government.
That's really interesting. How did this whole bill come about?
Great question. Back in 1975, President Gerald Ford signed the Education for All Handicapped Children Act, which required any state that accepted federal funding for education to provide equal opportunities to children with disabilities. Then, in 1997, President Bill Clinton reauthorized the act and renamed it the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. Like I mentioned prior, the federal government agreed to allocate 40% of their educational funding to the IDEA. Unfortunately, this was never seen. Again, we saw further cuts to funding when Betsy DeVos and President Trump further cut educational funding in 2018. It is with the hope of providing this funding that we have developed the IDEA full funding bill.
Thank you for sharing that information. Speaking of Donald Trump, let's look at an interview I had with the president back in 2018 when him and Betsy DeVos made cuts to education funding. Thank you for meeting with me, Mr. President. Could you quick discuss your 2018 budget cuts and how they impacted the IDEA Act?
Thank you, Bear. Well, first we must talk about building a wall. I know a lot about walls. Walls are great for so many things. It'll be so beneficial for our great, great country. We will be winning. We're gonna win so much, you may even get tired of winning. And you'll say, please, please, Mr. President, it's too much winning. And I'll say, no, it isn't.
Excuse me, Mr. President. Could we possibly get back on track? Tell me about your budget cuts and how they impacted the IDEA Act.
Well, Bear, the budget cuts are going to be huge. Don't worry about it. Me and my men, we have it covered. I have such great people working for me. Really great. We're going to be saving a lot of money. $113 million. That's a huge amount of money.
You're right, that is a lot of money to be cutting from the school funding for special education. So where is the 13.5 decrease in funding for the Department of Education going towards?
Believe me, Bear, this huge amount of money is going to be so useful for our country. It's going to pay for a private voucher school program.
So, correct me if I'm wrong, if parents accept this program, they sacrifice federal protections that their children have under the IDEA Act.
I cannot confirm nor deny this fact. All I can say is that these cuts are going to be huge.
Thank you for your time, Mr. President.
Anytime, Bear.
These budget cuts have significantly impacted access to special education throughout the country. Trump now has a 2021 budget proposal which will result in $6.1 billion decrease in education funding. With this proposal, the federal government will only pay 13% of special education costs, which is a record low for our country. I'm back here with Chris Van Hollen. Tell me what you think about these proposed budget cuts.
It's really disheartening to see this. Those budget cuts could have been used to provide children with the much-needed occupational therapy services that would benefit them throughout their schooling as well as throughout their lives.
You're right, that's quite unfortunate. Thank you for your time, Chris. Let's speak with an occupational therapist who can give us a little more insight into this.
Breaking news. A chicken crosses the road and tells us why. I'm here with Egbert III. Tell me, sir, why did you do it?
To cock-a-doodle-doo something.
Thank you for answering the question of the century. I'm sure many Americans can now sleep at night. Back to you, Wolf Blitzer.
Thank you, Nancy. I'm here with Jean Ayers, an occupational therapist from Saginaw, Michigan. So, tell me a little bit about yourself and what occupational therapy is.
Thanks, Wolf. It's great to be here. First, occupational therapists support students to succeed in their daily routines, including classrooms, playgrounds, lunchrooms, and extracurricular activities. An occupational therapist has a huge foundation in human development and activity participation. I'm a pediatric occupational therapist. I help students in elementary schools work on skills like physical impairment, handwriting, sensory integration, social skills training, and also their cognitive skills.
Wonderful! Seeing that you work in an elementary school, I can imagine that these proposed 2021 budget cuts have an impact on the services you provide. Can you elaborate on this?
Of course. So, students with disabilities receive occupational therapy services to help them access all parts of their school days. Like in past 30 years, Congress has established funding for the IDEA portion of special education at 18%. The current bill provides funding equals to 16%. Many of the American public schools have faced significant funding challenges. IDEA has made changes in the way students with disabilities are educated and radically changed the lifelong abilities of these students to engage a full member of our society.
Thank you for that explanation. Can you talk about how the proposed IDEA full funding bill impacts your profession?
Yeah, I can do that. It's a very interesting question. So with the IDEA full funding bill, occupational therapists are able to provide more services to students with disabilities because there is more funding that can be used for interventions. If the proposed budget cuts occur, our professional will not be able to provide as many services to children with disabilities, which significantly impact their quality of life.
Aaron as Diane Sawyer and Wolf Blitzer. Sydney as Chris Van Hollen and Nancy Grace. Theba as Jean Ayers. And Aubrey as Donald Trump and Egbert III.
Great talking to you, Bear.